Fans of video games sometimes think of them as a more active alternative to passive traditional media like television and movies. When I sit down to watch an episode of Old Enough over lunch, I'm not engaging in the same way as I do when I pick up a controller and go doot 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 on the buttons. That's how I play games. We think of cutscenes as being little in-game movies because it's when we can set the controller aside and cram as much butter-laden chips into our collective mouths. The logic is, if you're not interacting, not pushing a button, then you're not playing. But that way of thinking cuts us off from a whole alternate way of engaging with games. Is it possible to play a game without pushing a button? Is there a way games can encourage and even reward inaction rather than action? I started thinking about playing without action about 4 hours into Neon White, when I realized the game had been tricking me. So early in the game, when you don't have access to cool movement cards, jumping seems powerful. The slow descent and total air control give you a chance to catch your bearings and your breath. But it's also the slowest movement option in the game. Gravity just isn't as fast as being shot like a bullet. When you run a level for the first time, it's advantageous to jump. It gives you time to look around and spot any potential shortcuts for future runs. And a lot of Neon White's levels include sections where it seems like you need to jump, like this section. The lanes are just far enough that your first instinct is to hop over them. But doing so will cost you precious milliseconds. If instead you use the momentum from water skiing, you can slide right over those gaps. In mini levels, to get an ace, you need to learn specifically when not to jump. Comparable running games like Mirror's Edge or Dying Light designed their levels so that players have to press buttons with a certain consistency. That interactions per second model is part of their success. The almost rhythm game-esque pacing makes it easy for players to slip into the flow state. But that's based on this idea that players want or need to hit a button with a specific range of frequency in order to stay engaged. And Neon White takes that assumption that button input equals good and uses it to make all of their levels seem harder than they need to be. The fact that the devs at Angel Matrix built their levels to undermine this commonly held perception is tricky and smart and really funny. What that boils down to is that sometimes in Neon White, the right action is no action. It got me thinking about the ways games have leveraged inaction or non-participation, but it's not very common. There's only one place I could think of where devs consistently program a reward for non-action: the idle pose. From basic to character-driven, these animations were created explicitly to tell you when you're not doing anything. And they can be really sassy about it too. As far as inactive action in gameplay goes, auto chess battlers are a pretty recent genre that opens up what it means to be playing. Setting up characters is only part of the action. The other half is the delayed gratification of seeing the little clockwork army go to battle. Are you still playing when you're just watching those battles commence? I would argue it's inseparable from the gameplay, although it is closer to a passive media experience. But you're watching and you're learning and you're actively engaging mentally with what's happening. Loop Hero was a standout game of 2021 and a great example of this inverted action in action. You don't control a character, like you're not the one fighting slimes and vampires. Instead, you're almost a GM, setting down cards to help or hurt them and build up their world. Your role is to set this little pixel smudge up for success as it does its rounds. It's really tense to watch their health tick away, knowing you overloaded them with enemies or forgot to update their equipment. And I don't feel like I'm playing less just because my hands are covered in butter while they're valiantly battling skeletons. So there is room to play a game outside of those moments when you're pushing a button. But how do we find those options? Rather than thinking of it as a passive-active binary, I think we should think of it as an inaction-action binary. And that can kind of help us realize that doing nothing is also a choice we must make. Succumbing to inertia is easier, so it's often done by default. And that can make it hard to perceive as a choice, since that word has the implication of being active. But inaction can be a purposeful mechanism too, like refusing to place a bid on a 1/6 scale nude Lady Dimitrescu resin model kit sexy unpainted unassembled, because then you would own a 1/6 scale nude Lady Dimitrescu resin model kit sexy unpainted unassembled, and that's something you can't come back from. But letting that timer tick down, refusing to put in a bid, that is a choice of inaction. In the Dark Pictures anthology, sometimes being too gripped with panic or butter means you take the no action, and it actually helps. You have the choice to do nothing, trickily positioned as the default. It feels like a viable option rather than a punishment for having slippery fingies. Man of Medan has portions where doing nothing is the only good option, and part of the tension is not knowing when you need to lash out and when you should try caution. On the other hand, I played through a substantial section of Little Hope, making absolutely no choices, not looking or interacting with anything I didn't strictly have to. The result was not noticeably different from the normal playthrough where I selected choices. I didn't finish that playthrough because the game didn't really treat it like a legitimate strategy, so it was really boring to play. On the other hand, you have Firewatch. A lot of the gameplay is talking with the NPC Delilah. Often the game will force you into conversation, but it's possible to ignore her outside of that. And this lack of engagement is treated like a legitimate choice. You'll experience different dialogue than you would have if you had just talked to her, you sad monster. It's a much lonelier game that way, for Delilah and the player. But then again, loneliness is sometimes a choice, a decision not to engage when the options are there. All media is a form of communication. Movies, TV, books, they're one-directional conversations. You receive the information and apply your own thoughts and feelings to it. But no amount of screaming at a child to not let the apple roll back down the hill, are you kidding me, is gonna stop that apple from rolling back down that hill. That doesn't mean those forms of media are passive, just like it doesn't mean somebody listening thoughtfully but not actively speaking is being passive in a conversation. Consider Marina Abramovich's piece, The Artist is Present, where she sat in the MoMA every day for months, locking eyes with strangers. Many people were moved by Abramovich's silence, despite the fact that she did not seem to actively engage. It'll take a lot more than a RAM upgrade to get to that level of game performance art. But games have a tremendous ability to let you communicate back in real time, and that's a way more interesting way of thinking about it than just passive versus active. Games are a conversation that you get to participate in, respond to, change the course of. You can be the hand that keeps that apple from rolling back down the hill. Or not. Thank you for watching this video, and a special thank you to Alice, Lloyd Weldy, and Danielle Welch, who have each, on 3 separate occasions, saved some of my fruit from rolling down a really big hill. My hands are just always covered in butter. And thank you to all the middle-tier Patreon subscribers who voted on this very topic. It's one I've been thinking about for a while, and so I'm glad I finally got to do a video on it. It's also one that I'm really curious if you can think of, you, the audience, can think of any examples of games that reward inaction, because it really feels like there has to be more than I can think of, but those are all the ones I could think of. So if you can think of any, please leave a comment letting me know, because I probably just don't know about them, or I haven't thought about them in the right way to perceive this aspect of that game. The Patreon exclusive video this month is an essay about Japanese aesthetics written in the 1930s that I read forever ago that really informed this video essay. But you'll notice that I don't mention any essay in this video that was relevant to the topic, and there's a really specific reason for that, and that is what that video is about. So if you're interested in seeing that, or in voting on future topics, or seeing any of the exclusive Patreon videos, you can do that at patreon.com/thejenna.